The scent of cloying vanilla perfume and fresh carnations filled the auditorium as I watched my twin sister Maya accept my summa cum laude award. Her hands trembled as she wrapped her fingers around the crystal trophy, the one I'd bled for through 4 years of sleepless nights and searing, silent determination. My stomach churned with a familiar, acidic dread. She was doing it again, stealing what was mine in front of everyone. The provost's voice boomed from the speakers, a drumbeat of injustice. Presenting to our most distinguished graduate, Maya Chen. A storm of applause shattered the air. But I knew something they didn't. I knew about the official lab report burning a hole in my purse. My fingers traced the crisp edge of the envelope. The results inside would liberate me. Maya began her tearful acceptance speech, thanking professors I'd revered and referencing study groups she never attended. She had no idea this was all part of my plan. This perfect public moment was the beginning of her end. However, my moment wasn't in that suffocating hall. It was waiting in the humid night air. The sharp slap of the cool evening breeze on my face was a welcome shock as I followed her to the parking lot. She walked toward a gleaming new Mercedes, my Mercedes, technically, as it was a graduation gift purchased with the scholarship funds I had earned. Her heels clicked sharply against the wet asphalt, each sound a tiny echo of the life she'd pilfered. I felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and clean. The time for passive suffering was over. My panic had long ago cooled into a diamond-hard resolve, and I stepped from the profound shadow of a concrete support pillar. Congratulations! The word, whispered into the damp quiet, made her spin around. She gasped, clutching the crystal award to her chest like a shield. Mascara was already smudging beneath her wide, panicked eyes. Sophie, what are you doing here? Her voice was a fragile thread, cracking with manufactured surprise. The garage's ugly fluorescent lights cast long, skeletal shadows between us, turning the scene into something grim and theatrical. I let a slow smile spread across my face, tasting the imminent victory on my tongue. It was dark and bitter, like expensive chocolate. But then, the smile faded. It was time for the blade. Funny thing about identical twins, I said, my voice dangerously soft. I pulled the stiff laboratory envelope from my purse. The sight of it made her flinch, a sudden, violent shudder. Her face drained of all color, leaving a pasty, terrified mask. We share the same DNA. I unfolded the single sheet of paper. It rustled in the slight breeze, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,400 stolen days. This is a certified DNA analysis from the university's own biology lab. It proves you've been attending my classes, taking my exams, living my life. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably. With a soft clink, she set the heavy award on the hood of the car. The trophy, my trophy, reflected the sickly yellow lights, a beacon of her magnificent fraud. Sophie, please, she begged, her voice dissolving into a pathetic whimper. Let me explain. I didn't let her finish. I turned my back on her and her stolen dreams and walked away without another word. My phone was already buzzing in my hand. The first notification had arrived. The game had truly begun. The next morning, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird beating its wings inside my chest. But my hands were steady as I watched the video go viral in real time. The footage was perfect, shot from a discreet angle in the parking garage. It captured the harsh lighting, Maya's shocked, crumbling face, the clear view of the DNA results in my hand, and her stammered, guilty attempts at an explanation. I had uploaded it to every university social media page, and from there, it had exploded. Comments flooded the screen, a torrent of digital outrage. Identity theft at graduation? Which twin is the real one? Chen's scandal. I was in her class, or was it his class? I'm so confused. My phone began to ring incessantly. Local news stations, student journalists, the university's alumni association. By morning, the administration's emergency PR team would be in full-blown panic. I locked my apartment door, the deadbolt sliding home with a satisfying thud. I brewed a pot of brutally strong coffee, inhaling the rich, bitter aroma that had been my only companion through countless nights of planning this very moment. Maya's meticulously constructed future, built on the bedrock of my work, was already crumbling into dust. And this was only the beginning. The social media explosion was a wildfire I had set, but the true damage, the deepest burns, were waiting for me at home. I found my mother in the kitchen, the air thick with the familiar scent of jasmine tea and a suffocating sense of disappointment. Steam curled from the two chipped mugs on the table, twisting like the lies that had poisoned our family for years. The morning news played softly from a small TV on the counter. A picture of Maya's tear-streaked face was frozen on the screen next to a bold headline, Twin Scandal Rocks University. My heart felt like a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I watched Mom's weathered hands. They were trembling. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. Her silence was a confession, more damning than any word she could have spoken. She refused to meet my gaze. Her eyes, once a source of warmth and love, now skittered away, landing on anything but me. My own mother couldn't look at me. The realization was a physical blow, stealing my breath. "Maya needed the opportunity more," she finally whispered. The words were quiet, but they landed like shards of broken glass, slicing through the last vestiges of my hope. "She has the charm," Mom continued, her voice gaining a defensive edge. "You have the intelligence, Sophie. We thought it would be a perfect combination." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a strategy. They had willfully conspired to erase me, merging my identity with my sister's to create one perfect daughter. My own mother had been the chief architect of my destruction. However, Mom was just the first domino. The financial web I knew led to my father. I found him in his study, hiding behind a mahogany desk that smelled of old books and broken trust. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dancing dust particles and the grim set of his jaw. The leather chair where he'd once helped me with homework now felt like a throne of betrayal. I didn't speak. I simply laid out the bank statements I had spent months secretly gathering. The papers fanned across the polished wood, a stark black and white accounting of their treachery. "The scholarship money," I said, my voice eerily calm. "All of it, every semester, deposited directly into an account for Maya." His face, usually so composed, crumpled like a sheet of wet paper. The fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving a hollowed-out old man. He stared at the documents, at the proof of how they had systematically defunded my future to finance hers. "We thought you'd given up on college," he mumbled, the lie weak and pathetic. His eyes, however, betrayed the horrifying truth. "We saw how much she wanted it," he admitted, his voice cracking. "We thought her personality would take her further than your grades ever could." The calculation behind their cruelty was staggering. They hadn't just chosen one daughter over the other, they had made a calculated investment, betting on Maya's charm and using my soul as the collateral. But then I had to face the deeper cut, the one that festered outside the walls of my family home. Emma's apartment reeked of vanilla candles and cloying deception. She had been my best friend since we were children, the keeper of all my secrets, or so I had thought. She poured 2 glasses of red wine with hands that shook, the liquid sloshing precariously close to the rim. The wine tasted bitter on my tongue, sour with the knowledge of her complicity. "I wanted to tell you, Soph," she insisted, her voice hollow in the dimly lit living room. "I swear I did." I just stared at her, my silence a heavy blanket smothering her weak excuses. I watched her nervously fidget with her new engagement ring, a beautiful diamond that sparkled under the lamplight. It was a ring, I knew, bought with the signing bonus from the past paralegal job she'd helped Maya secure. A job Maya had gotten using my stolen credentials. "Maya made me promise," Emma whispered, her eyes pleading for an absolution I could not give. "She said you were fine with it, that it was your plan to help her get a start in life." Outside, a sudden storm broke. Rain began to pelt against the window panes, a furious drumming that matched the frantic, helpless rage in my own heart. The tears I refused to shed were falling from the sky instead. My best friend hadn't just watched Maya steal my identity. She had actively helped her profit from it. The betrayal was absolute, shattering 20 years of trust into a million irreparable pieces. The final ghost of my past was waiting for me at a coffee shop. The place where I'd first met James now felt like a crime scene. The rich aroma of roasting espresso beans couldn't mask the stench of his betrayal. He sat across from me, looking lost and miserable. His guitar, the one he'd used to serenade Maya, thinking she was me, was propped against the exposed brick wall beside him. "I loved you," he said, his voice barely audible above the screech of the milk steamer. His words were meant to be a comfort, but they were a special kind of poison. My own heart, which I thought had been shattered beyond repair, found a new way to break. "No, you didn't," I replied, my voice flat. I gripped my scalding latte, the heat a welcome distraction. "You loved a performance. You loved her confidence and my accomplishments, all wrapped up in one convenient package." The irony was the cruelest part. He had fallen for the polished, charming version of me that Maya had perfected. He had chosen the lie. His confusion was almost pitiable as he struggled to reconcile the girl he thought he knew with the fraud she was. But pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. This last painful encounter clarified everything. The conspiracy wasn't just about giving Maya a leg up. It was about replacing me completely. I stood up, leaving my full cup on the table. As I walked out, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The pain wasn't gone, but it had finally crystallized into purpose. They had all conspired against me. Now they would all face the consequences. Maya's triumphant phone calls had buzzed incessantly on my kitchen counter all week. She'd landed a final round interview with Sterling and Croft, the most prestigious law firm in the state, a position she was only qualified for because of my academic credentials. The morning sun cast long, judgmental shadows across my apartment as I crafted my first true counterstrike. The air, thick with the sharp scent of bergamot tea, felt charged with electricity. Vengeance had its own distinct fragrance. My fingers, steady and sure, moved across the keyboard, composing an anonymous email to the firm's head of recruitment. The subject line was simple, clinical, and devastating. "Fraudulent candidate alert, Maya Chen." My own heart began to tremble, not with fear, but with a terrible, thrilling anticipation. I attached the scanned images, Maya's real, pathetic transcripts from community college, screenshots of the university's official statement on the identity theft scandal, and a link to the viral video of our parking lot confrontation. The send button on the screen glowed like a portal to justice. I took one last slow sip of my tea, savoring the moment before the storm. Then I clicked it. One single silent click to completely unravel years of her carefully constructed lies. The next morning, the call came precisely at 6:02 a.m., a shrill cry of desperation cutting through my peaceful morning calm. "Sophie, they rescinded the job offer." Maya's voice was a frantic sob, the words tumbling over each other in a panicked rush. "They took it back." I cradled my warm mug of coffee, watching the golden light of dawn spill over the city skyline. I took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring the rich, dark flavor. Her anguish was a symphony in my ears. "They sent me an email," she continued, her breathing ragged and hysterical. "They said an anonymous source sent them my real academic records. They called me a fraud, Sophie. A fraud." I made a soft, sympathetic sound, a perfect imitation of concern. The performance was effortless after years of watching hers. My feigned pity was a sharp, satisfying blade. "Who would do this to me?" she wailed, her voice breaking completely. "Who would try to ruin my life?" The irony was so potent, so delicious, I almost laughed out loud. She, the architect of my erasure, was crying about being sabotaged. Her entire world, built upon my stolen foundation, was finally starting to crumble. However, her panic was just the prelude. The main event was the emergency family meeting that evening. The tension in my mother's living room was a physical entity, thick enough to choke on. It mingled with the cloying scent of Mom's stress baking, a sweet, desperate attempt to smooth over a situation that was irrevocably broken. Maya was curled into a ball on the corner of the sofa, her usual radiant confidence replaced by a raw, ugly vulnerability. Dad paced restlessly by the window, his heavy footsteps on the hardwood floors sounding like a judge's gavel. "This has gone too far, Sophie," my mother declared, her voice sharp with a misplaced maternal authority that now grated on my nerves. "This has to stop." I remained perfectly still, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I felt like a sphinx, a stone statue guarding ancient, painful secrets. I let her command hang in the air unanswered until the silence became unbearable. What has to stop? I asked, my voice measured and genuinely curious. Maya flinched as if I had struck her. My parents stared, stunned by my placid defiance. The family that had conspired to sacrifice me was finally tasting the cold, suffocating fear they had fed me for years. But then, the private reckoning became a public spectacle. The glare of a news crew's camera lights suddenly flooded the living room windows, transforming our quiet suburban street into a media circus. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, gathered on their lawns like vultures sensing a fresh kill. Their whispered conversations and pointed fingers were carried on the evening breeze. Maya cowered behind the curtains, her body shaking with violent tremors. I, on the other hand, stood up. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped onto the porch to face the reporters. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but I stood tall, my posture radiating a calm I did not feel. "Miss Chen," a reporter began, thrusting a microphone toward my face, her eyes gleaming with a hungry, predatory light. "Can you comment on the allegations that your twin sister stole your identity?" "Identity theft is a serious crime," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "I am cooperating fully with the university and the authorities to ensure the truth comes out." "What's your next step, Sophie?" the reporter pressed. From behind me, inside the house, I could hear the distinct sound of Maya beginning to weep, her wretched sobs mixing with the distant hum of city traffic. The public humiliation was absolute, her reputation shattering like glass on concrete for the entire world to see. The rain came later, a relentless drumming against my apartment windows that matched the turmoil of the day. It was almost midnight when the knock came. It was soft, hesitant, pathetic. I opened the door to find Maya standing on my welcome mat, looking like a drowned rat. The rain had plastered her hair to her skull, and her mascara had carved black rivers down her pale cheeks. She looked smaller, diminished by the crushing weight of consequences. She was shivering, but I didn't invite her in. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying and shredded by desperation. The word was a puff of steam in the cold night air. "I'll do anything," she begged, her eyes wide and pleading in the dim hallway light. The desperation rolling off her was almost gratifying. "I'll confess publicly. I'll tell everyone what I did. I'll pay back every single dollar of the scholarship money." I let her stand there in my doorway, rain-soaked and broken, while I considered her offer. The power had shifted so completely it was dizzying. She was no longer the golden child, the chosen one. She was a beggar at my door, pleading for mercy from the sister she had destroyed. I tilted my head, my expression unreadable. "Anything?" I asked, my voice as soft as silk, but as sharp and as cold as steel. Her eager, desperate nod sealed her fate. Maya's promise to do anything was a lie, of course. It was merely a desperate bid to pause my offensive so she could launch her own. While I was supposedly distracted by the initial legal proceedings and media attention, she made her most audacious move yet. She applied to medical school, using my name, my MCAT scores, my stellar academic record. The acceptance letter from Johns Hopkins, forwarded from our parents' house, lay spread across my desk like a treasure map to a stolen kingdom. Its official embossed seal caught the morning light, a golden taunt. Her arrogance was breathtaking. She truly believed she had outmaneuvered me. My coffee had grown cold as I sat there, not in shock, but in cold, calculating fury. I spent the next hour crafting the most precise and damning email of my life. I addressed it directly to the Dean of Admissions. My fingers flew across the keyboard, detailing every forged document, every stolen achievement, and the ongoing university investigation. My finger hovered over the send button, anticipation crackling through me like a live wire. The medical community would indeed learn the name Maya Chen, but it would be a name synonymous with poison, not healing. However, the school was only one front. The true financial blow came from a different direction. The call from the National Merit Scholarship Foundation came on a gray Tuesday morning. The investigator's voice was crisp and professional, devoid of emotion. They were following up on Maya's application for a full-ride medical scholarship. The irony tasted like acid on my tongue. She was stealing from me again to fund a career pretending to care for others. The hypocrisy was staggering. "We just need to verify a few details from Miss Chen's undergraduate record," the investigator said. "Of course," I replied, my voice smooth as glass. "But first, I need to ask which Miss Chen you believe you are speaking with." I provided him with everything: a meticulously organized digital folder containing the DNA tests, the side-by-side academic records, witness testimonies from fellow students, and the university's public statement. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. The investigator's professional tone cracked, replaced by disbelief. This is unprecedented," he finally breathed into the phone. The Foundation's reputation for integrity was paramount. Their action, I knew, would be swift and merciless. Maya's river of stolen money was about to be dammed. Her scholarship would vanish like morning mist. The official rejection letter from Johns Hopkins arrived on a Thursday. I made sure I was there to see it. I watched from my car, parked across the street from my parents' house. The evening air carried the sweet, heavy scent of blooming jasmine, a sickeningly cruel contrast to the bitter scene about to unfold. I saw Maya check the mail, her movements confident, almost arrogant. She tore open the thick, important-looking envelope. I watched her face cycle through the stages of destruction in high definition. First, confusion. Then, a flicker of disbelief. Finally, the wave of utter devastation hit her like a physical blow. Her legs gave out. She crumpled onto the porch steps, her body folding in on itself. The stark white letter fluttered from her nerveless fingers, landing on the grass like a defeated bird. Dad rushed out of the house, his face creased with a familiar paternal worry. But even he couldn't fix this. The medical school had not only rescinded her acceptance, but had also flagged her application for academic fraud across all partner institutions in the country. Her dream of becoming a doctor was over before it ever began. It had been professionally and permanently executed. The next family meeting felt less like an intervention and more like a tribunal, where I was the sole silent judge. This time they gathered in the formal dining room. The heavy chandelier cast harsh, unforgiving shadows across their faces. Each one was etched with a grim combination of guilt, fear, and rising desperation. Emma was there too, a silent, miserable fixture in the corner, her loyalty visibly shattered. "You are destroying her life, Sophie," my father accused, his voice heavy with a paternal disappointment that no longer had any effect on me. I didn't flinch. My hands were steady as I raised a cup of chamomile tea, from Mom's best china, of course, to my lips. I took a slow sip, letting the accusation hang in the air. "No," I replied calmly, my voice resonating in the tense silence. "I am reclaiming mine." I watched their faces. They had expected tears, anger, a negotiation. They were not prepared for my cold, immovable resolve. The family that had so eagerly enabled her theft was finally, truly confronting the consequences of their choices. Their united front had shattered. Now they were just four panicked people in a room with the ghost they had tried to bury. But then came the second begging. It was more desperate, more pathetic than the first. This time, Maya came to my office, the small but growing consulting firm I had built from scratch with my own mind and my own two hands. The power dynamic could not have been more stark. She looked haggard. The once perfect facade was showing deep cracks, like old paint. The unforgiving fluorescent lights of my workplace exposed the dark circles under her eyes and the frantic, hunted look she couldn't hide. "I'll leave town," she whispered, her voice breaking. She stood before my desk, a supplicant in a designer suit that couldn't conceal her profound desperation. "I'll change my name. I will disappear completely. Just stop this." Her promises felt hollow, temporary solutions to a permanent wound. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, the chair I had earned. I studied her as a scientist studies a specimen under a microscope, with detached clinical interest. Her performance of remorse was excellent, but it was still just a performance. "Why?" I asked, my voice genuinely curious. "Why should I trust you now?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. The silence that stretched between us spoke volumes. Trust, once systematically betrayed for years, could not be restored with promises whispered in desperation. It was gone forever. Maya's engagement party invitation arrived on a Tuesday. a declaration of war disguised in cream-colored cardstock. The elegant, looping script felt like a personal mockery, announcing her upcoming union to Richard, the handsome law professor she'd ensnared while wearing my life like a costume. The venue was the Oak Creek Country Club, a place saturated with memories of every family milestone except mine. A bitter, metallic taste filled my mouth. She wasn't just stealing a man, she was attempting to overwrite my entire history, cementing her fraudulent existence in the one place I once considered a sanctuary. My heart didn't race with panic. It beat with a slow, cold deliberation. A profound sense of purpose settled over me, chilling the anger into something sharp and precise. Maya thought this wedding was her ultimate victory, the final nail in the coffin of my identity. She was wrong. This was her greatest vulnerability. However, I received another invitation, this one to a fundraiser for the State Bar Association, hosted at the very same country club. A small, cruel smile touched my lips. The universe had a wicked sense of humor. For weeks, I laid the groundwork. I attended legal mixers and charity luncheons, allowing my own mind, my own wit, my own ambitions to shine. I wasn't pretending to be anyone. I was simply being Sophie. The irony was exquisite. I was dismantling her life by finally living my own. I befriended Richard's colleagues, charmed the partners at his firm, and shared a long, pleasant chat with his own mother about Renaissance art during a gallery opening. I planted seeds of doubt not with accusations, but with authenticity. People were drawn to the real me, the person Maya could only imitate. The scent of brewing jasmine tea and quiet satisfaction filled my apartment. My revenge wouldn't be a loud explosion. It would be a subtle, systematic unraveling, a quiet corrosion of the lies she'd built around herself. The final piece of this stage fell into place over afternoon tea with Mrs. Harrison, Richard's mother. The porcelain cups were delicate, the scones were warm, and the sunlight streamed into the hotel lounge. "You know," she said, her eyes filled with a dawning, horrified understanding after I'd shared a few key, verifiable details about my academic journey. "Richard once told me Maya felt like two different people. Now I understand why." The first crack in the foundation had appeared, but then, a social fissure wasn't enough. Maya's professional persona, the one built on my summa cum laude degree, had to be systematically dismantled. I shifted my focus to the upcoming regional law conference, a 3-day affair buzzing with the electric energy of ambition and networking. The air in the convention center was thick with the scent of stale hotel coffee and expensive cologne. It was the perfect hunting ground. Maya had built an impressive network, a web of contacts who believed she was a rising star. They were connections built on quicksand. My movements were calculated. I became a specter of truth haunting the halls. I'd approach a judge she'd supposedly impressed, a partner from a firm that had courted her, or a mentor who had taken her under their wing. My approach was always the same, calm, professional, and armed with indisputable proof. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding Maya Chen," I'd begin, sliding a folder across a small cafe table. Inside were my transcripts next to hers, the DNA report, the university's official statement. I watched faces cycle from polite skepticism to slack-jawed shock. The color drained from their cheeks, their professional poise shattering like brittle glass. Each conversation was a door slamming shut in Maya's face, a bridge burning to ash. Her name, once a symbol of promise, was becoming synonymous with fraud. The whispers started as a low murmur and grew into a roar that echoed through the legal community. Her reputation preceded her now, a toxic cloud of deceit. She was being erased from the world she fought so desperately to inhabit. The next morning, my phone rang at 3:17 a.m. The caller ID flashed Richard's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I sat up in bed, the cool night air raising goosebumps on my arms. The city lights outside my window blinked like distant, unfeeling stars. "Sophie." His voice was a raw, shaking whisper, thick with betrayal and a confusion so profound it was heartbreaking. I don't understand." I remained silent, letting him fill the void. She's not who she said she was," he stammered, the words catching in his throat. He sounded like he was suffocating. I could hear his sharp, ragged breaths over the line. "The degree, the awards, the scholarship you won? She told me it was all her. His voice finally broke on a sob. How long? How long has she been lying to me? I listened to the sound of a man's world falling apart. He had fallen in love with a ghost, a carefully curated collection of my best qualities and her most charming lies. The stunning diamond ring he'd placed on her finger was not a symbol of their future, but evidence of a crime. For 4 years, Richard, I said, my voice even and devoid of pity. She has been lying to you for 4 years. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. It was the sound of a future being deleted. However, the fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The chaos began with a mistaken phone call. The wedding planner from the country club, a frazzled woman named Brenda, called me by mistake, her voice tight with stress. Maya, listen, we have a situation, she began, not waiting for a response. Mr. Harrison's father just called. He's canceling everything. He said the deposits are forfeit, but he's demanding we blacklist the Chen family from all future events. My fingers tightened around my phone. Blacklisted. The public humiliation was more complete than I could have imagined. He mentioned fraud? Brenda's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. What on earth is going on? I played dumb, murmuring something about a family emergency before hanging up. But the calls from panicked vendors, florists, and caterers soon started flooding my parents' home. News of the canceled wedding spread through our town's gossip mill like a wildfire. The society pages, which were meant to feature Maya's triumphant engagement photos, were now buzzing with scandalous speculation. Her social debut had transformed into a public execution. That evening, I drove past the Oak Creek Country Club. Its grand windows glowed with warm, inviting light, a beacon of the life she had craved and lost. The place where she was supposed to be celebrating her victory was now a monument to her ruin. The irony was so perfect, it tasted sweet. The final act of her social demise came not from a public forum, but from a quiet, desperate phone call. It was Emma, my former best friend, who delivered the news. Her voice was heavy with a conflicted, weary sorrow. I just saw her, Emma said, the sound of her car's blinker clicking rhythmically in the background. In the parking lot at the grocery store. She was just sitting in her car, crying. My own heart remained a stone in my chest. I felt nothing. No pity, no remorse. Just a vast, empty calm. She's a ghost, Sophie, Emma continued, her voice cracking. She can't show her face anywhere. At the coffee shop, the book club, people just turn their backs. They whisper when she walks by. The whole town knows. Maya had become a cautionary tale, a pariah, the woman who stole her sister's life only to have her own implode. Every social media platform was a minefield, every potential friendship tainted by the scandal, and she was utterly, completely alone. The isolation I had endured for 4 years had been a slow, creeping poison. Hers was a sudden, brutal amputation. The social exile was absolute, her public death as thorough and as devastating as my academic murder had been. She had lost everything she had stolen and everything she had ever been. But as I hung up the phone, a new, chilling thought entered my mind. A woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of all. What would she do now? I thought Maya's social exile was the end of the game. I was wrong. It was merely the end of the beginning. The real truth arrived on a mundane Tuesday morning, delivered through a phone call that would change everything. I was in my corner office, the one I had earned, reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant patched through a call from a Mr. Alistair Finch. Miss Chen? The lawyer's voice came through the speaker, carrying a dry, amused warmth that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The real Miss Sophie Chen, that is. My pulse quickened, a sudden, frantic staccato in the quiet of my office. I represent the estate of your late grandmother, Eleanor Chen, he continued. I've been trying to locate you for some time. The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning, leaving me breathless. Nai. She had died over 6 months ago. My family had said nothing, hiding her death from me while they propped up Maya's continued impersonation. My grief was instantly consumed by a burning, furious question. Why? Mr. Finch provided the answer. The inheritance was substantial. A tech company portfolio worth $12 million. properties in 3 different states, and a trust fund that had been quietly accumulating interest for 25 years. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. All this time, while I was scrimping and saving, Maya had been stealing the identity of a secret heiress. My entire life of struggle, my poverty, had been a lie orchestrated by my own family. I was not just a victim of identity theft, I was the victim of a massive conspiracy. However, the lawyer's call was only the first tremor of the earthquake. The full scale of the deception was revealed in a thick manila folder that landed on my desk the next day. It was the final report from the private investigator I had hired weeks ago, and its contents were more explosive than I had dared to imagine. He had uncovered a hidden paper trail, a series of monthly payments from Nai's estate directly to my parents. The payments were contingent on my academic success, a success they had fraudulently assigned to Maya. The conspiracy wasn't just about simple favoritism. It was a cold, calculated financial scheme that had spanned my entire adult life. My hands trembled as I flipped through the evidence. Bank records showing suspicious transfers, forged signatures on legal documents. They had even falsified reports to the estate, claiming I was happily pursuing my studies to ensure the money kept flowing. The betrayal was no longer just personal. It was professional, systematic, and utterly ruthless. They had sold my identity, my very existence, to maintain their access to my grandmother's generational wealth. The next week, I walked into the gleaming headquarters of Chen Innovations, my grandmother's company. My heels clicked on the cool marble floors, each step a hammer blow of approaching justice. The air smelled of money and power. The board members, all men in sharp, expensive suits, were gathered in the main conference room. They were expecting Maya, their supposed heir apparent, to finally make her appearance. Instead, they got me. The shock in the room was a palpable force. I said nothing at first, simply allowing my lawyer, Mr. Finch, to distribute the folders. The DNA evidence was irrefutable. The legal documentation was pristine. Within an hour, it was over. I owned a controlling interest in a company that, in a twist of fate so perfect it felt scripted, developed identity verification software. The chairman, a man with weary, defeated eyes, gestured to the empty leather chair at the head of the vast mahogany table. Nai's chair. The board watched in stunned, terrified silence as I walked to the head of the table and took my seat. The power in the room had shifted completely. But then came the most painful revelation of all, the estate. The mansion's gardens stretched toward the horizon, a promise of a life I never knew I had lost. Their manicured perfection was a stark, brutal contrast to the chaos and poverty my family had forced upon me. Nai's housekeeper, a kind woman named Mrs. Liu, wept as she placed the mansion's keys into my hand. Keys I should have received months ago. "She spoke of you often," Mrs. Liu whispered to me in Mandarin, her voice thick with the weight of her own guilt and profound relief. "She was so proud of your mind. She said you were the future of the family." As I walked through the quiet, sun-drenched rooms, I felt my grandmother's presence everywhere. I saw her taste in the priceless art collections, her intellect in the library of rare books, her history in the family heirlooms. This was my legacy. Maya's theft suddenly seemed so much bigger. It wasn't just my life she had stolen. It was ancestral. She had stolen from the dead as well as the living, desecrating the memory of a woman who had believed in me. The news of my inheritance and my hostile takeover of Chen Innovations spread through our small town like wildfire. Overnight, I was transformed. I was no longer Sophie Chen, the quiet, wronged victim. I was Sophie Chen, the power player. The reversal was absolute. Maya's former friends and my family's professional contacts began calling my new office, their voices syrupy with a false warmth that was nauseatingly transparent. They were desperate to align themselves with my newfound power. The irony was dizzying. I could now buy the country club that had blacklisted my family. I could acquire the law firm that had rescinded Maya's fraudulent job offer. I could fund the entire medical school that had rejected her application just to put my name on the building. The woman who had stolen my identity was now completely at the mercy of my financial power. But as I stood in my grandmother's library staring out at the vast gardens, I felt a strange emptiness. Revenge through wealth felt too easy, too clean. It wasn't enough. Maya deserved something more personal, something more perfectly and poetically fitted to her crimes. The revenge I chose was not financial, it was simply the truth. They came to me as supplicants a week later, gathering in my vast new office at Chen Innovations. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind me overlooked the entire city, a sprawling territory Maya had once hoped to conquer. My mother clutched a tear-stained, handwritten letter. My father's broad shoulders sagged with the crushing weight of his guilt. And Maya. Maya sat hunched in a chair in the corner, a beautiful, broken doll whose strings had been cut. Even Emma stood behind them, her left hand conspicuously bare, the engagement ring another casualty of the truth. "We're sorry, Sophie," my mother began, her voice cracking with a grief that felt performative. "We know we destroyed everything, your trust, your future, your faith in family." Their apologies filled the air like thick, acrid smoke, obscuring the damage but cleansing nothing. Maya finally looked at me, her eyes hollowed out by despair. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'll spend the rest of my life making this right, I swear." However, their words were meaningless. They were years too late. I let their pleas hang in the charged silence of the room for a full, excruciating minute. I studied each face that had betrayed me, while the late afternoon sun cast long, dramatic shadows across my Persian rug. When I finally spoke, my voice was as calm and as deep as still water. It carried the weight of the years they'd dismissed and the dreams they'd systematically stolen. No. The word was simple, final, complete. It landed in the center of the room with the force of a physical object, and the shock on their faces was profound. I didn't elaborate. I didn't scream or cry or list my grievances. I refused to give them the satisfaction of an argument or the release of a dramatic confrontation. I simply refused to accept their apologies, their promises, their desperate, self-serving attempts to repair what they had so ruthlessly destroyed. "No," I repeated softly, turning my back on them to face the window, dismissing them completely. But then, Maya's composure finally, catastrophically, shattered. Her breakdown was a devastating spectacle. The composed facade she had maintained her entire life cracked apart like a dam under unbearable pressure. She collapsed from her chair onto her knees, her body racked with guttural sobs that echoed off the glass walls like the cries of a wounded animal. "Please," she begged, her hands clasped in front of her as if in prayer. "I'll do anything. I'll disappear. I'll confess on every news channel. I'll dedicate my entire life to a charity in your name." Her desperation only served to highlight the chilling cruelty of her original crimes. She was now experiencing a microscopic fraction of the helplessness she had forced me to endure for years. I watched her complete disintegration with the cool, detached interest of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. Her tears couldn't wash away my stolen youth. Her promises felt as worthless as counterfeit currency. She was not sorry for what she did. She was only sorry she got caught. The final goodbye was quiet and sterile. Security escorted them from my building as gently as possible. Their shuffling footsteps echoed through the marble lobby like a funereal procession for a family that no longer existed. I watched from my office window high above as they climbed into my father's old, dented sedan, a pathetic symbol of their new, diminished reality. They looked small and defeated. As the car prepared to pull away from the curb, Maya pressed her face against the back window. Her eyes found mine, even from that distance. Her mouth formed words I couldn't hear and had no desire to understand. Then they were gone, disappearing into the afternoon traffic. The golden light of the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues, signaling not just an ending, but a new beginning. They were no longer my burden to bear. The profound silence they left behind was the sound of my own freedom. 6 months later, I stood on the sprawling deck of my home in Malibu, watching the Pacific Ocean paint the horizon in impossible shades of coral and gold. The cool, salt-laced breeze felt like it was carrying away the last vestiges of the cold, hard anger that had sustained me for so long. The story had found its end. Maya, true to her last desperate promise, had left the state. Her social media was deleted, her professional ambitions abandoned forever. The family that had betrayed me was struggling, mired in legal fees and the quiet shame of their social exile. I found no joy in it, only a distant sense of justice. The magnificent sunset reminded me that even the most painful, suffocating days eventually end, making way for something beautiful and unprecedented. My new life is peaceful. My home office overlooks gardens where hummingbirds dance among jasmine flowers, their flight patterns random and joyful. They remind me of the spontaneity I lost during my years of calculated revenge and am now slowly rediscovering. Chen Innovations, under my leadership, thrives. We have become the industry leader in protecting people from the very crime that almost destroyed me. From the ashes of my pain, I built an empire dedicated to justice. I also started a new scholarship fund, the Phoenix Foundation, for gifted students whose academic achievements have been deliberately overshadowed or stolen by others. The morning coffee tastes richer when savored without the bitter aftertaste of vengeance. And as I watch the sun rise over the ocean, I finally understand that true victory wasn't in destroying them. It was in rebuilding myself into someone even stronger than before.